benefit is going to be twofold. Hopefully there will be a benefit. Hopefully we'll be able to learn something together. But we're going to talk about a lot of different items highlighted in this particular Talmud text that Dan said. Dan, if you didn't hear it, you didn't get the email, whatever, we're going to discuss it very thoroughly. But I think perhaps even more than that, the benefit could be derived in just the experience of actually analyzing what's the thing that surgeons do? Surgeons, they dissecting. Thank you. Dissecting a piece of Talmud, because as we all know, the Talmud is a series of books. I don't know how many books. How many books are you talking about with the Talmud?
39.
75.
Well, 39 or 63, depends how you count them. Yeah, so it's an enormous corpus of literature that we have that is remarkably more than 1,500 years old. So it's enormously old, yet just incredible in its scope and its breadth and its depth in every way possible. And I hypothesized recently that there's more people in the world studying Talmud for pure scholarly purposes than any other piece of wisdom. So it was more
scholarly, meaning what?
Yeah, as opposed to doing it to get your degree or something like that, or to learn medicine to become a doctor. You learn law to become a lawyer, or to get licensed or whatever. Just for pure scholarly purposes, or for scholarship or for research purposes, more people studying Talmud. So it's remarkable how it lasted that long, and how till this day there's hundreds of thousands of people that are studying it every day. And when you study Talmud, the more you kind of get your feet wet, you'll notice that there's really it's a mixture of two kinds of study. Number one, you have halacha. Number two, you have agadata. What we're going to focus on today is agadata. It's a particular agadic piece, just two lines from the Talmud in Brachos, which happens to be the very first book of the Talmud. Now, this is the point I want to convey, because you'll see why it's important. I'm not belaboring the point. Talmud is basically all Jewish law. And Jewish law covers every imaginable aspect of law, of civil, of criminal, of ritual law. I mean, we have law covering property law. There's pages upon pages of documents, books upon books written about property law. And this is and you look at the laws regarding property law, and it's just remarkable how it's so easily translatable to today. You have two neighbors, and am I allowed to do something that's going to inhibit your? Am I allowed to build a window that looks into your pool, or am I allowed to plant a tree right next to your fence, and it's going to ruin your crops? Or if a wall separating two neighbors, it falls down, who has to pay for it? Who gets to keep the stone? Like very practical, very tangible kind of discussion about law. What does the Jewish law say about that? Finding lost items, all kinds of interpersonal damages, etc. Now, when you learn that, you'll notice how fastidious the Talmud is in trying to clarify or to give over the law as clearly as possible. It talks about hypotheticals that you won't even imagine. Hypotheticals, some of them like blow your mind, like these hypotheticals that it will come up with, because it's trying to teach you the principles. So even if you read this, like, did this really ever happen? Like, I talked about the one that came up the top of my head. I don't want to share. Well, why not? That's the adult class, right? So there's this. Oh gosh, there's this. I should say it, right? There's this. Huh?
With the woman or a man?
Both. That's. It's talking about a certain kind of halachic change that is going to happen during intercourse. Okay, and it's going, and it mentions that it doesn't matter whether or not it's done intentionally or willfully or intentionally or done by mistake or done. And the Talmud says, how could it possibly happen by mistake? So there's this whole debate as to whether or not. Oh gosh, this is what's discussed in the Talmud. Like, it's just without any, there's no sugarcoating whatsoever. either way, it paints this image of some man on a rooftop who just falls down by mistake, and somehow like you read that man on the rooftop that happens to be. It's to try and create a situation where it's just, anyhow, that's like an example of popped in my head. I apologize for the uncouthness. Either way, that's what it does, because when it's trying to teach you law, it's trying to teach you law. And it will go to very great lengths to make it as clear as possible. It will discuss every possibility. It will analyze every aspect. It will give you all the exceptions. It'll give you all the sources. It'll give you everything you need to know. Now, it may be a lot, but it'll give it all there. It may be pages upon pages and commentaries and just to analyze what the basic text even means. But eventually you get it if you study it correctly. That is law. That is halacha. Yes.
Do we get ever see anything that violates the don't add to or detract from?
Yeah, of course. That's a Torah verse even. That's a verse 3 times in the Torah.
I know that, but with this Talmud business, with their interpretations.
No, it's not interpretations. No, according to the tradition, the Talmud is just writing down what was the oral tradition already then, what they learned from their teachers, and they had to write it down. We'll get to in next history class. We'll talk about. We already talked about it in the previous history class. We'll talk about why the necessity for writing it down, because it became unviable to be transmitted orally only. But it was a way of life coupled with the way of a systemized method of instruction, where there was dedicated students and dedicated teachers and proper infrastructure and a certain measure of peace and stability, political, and the Jews were relatively stable, and it was possible. They had to write it down because otherwise the Jews would have forgotten the Torah. So when you have a discussion about any particular law, the assumption is, or the argument is, that this is the actual law that Moses taught the Jewish people. That's the interpretation of the law, of the written law, that is, the Torah. The Torah says the laws of finding the lost object and the corresponding Talmudical, all the particular insights, all those things were taught by Moses. That's been the traditional perspective. And there's a lot of evidence to support that. Is it possible that there was some mistake in transmission? That's a debate that we could talk about that. I have a lot to say about that. Either way, that is law. The vast majority of Talmud is that kind of law. It takes a particular subject. We have 63 books, so it basically covers it's like 10 or 15 agricultural ones, all the agricultural laws relating to holidays, interpersonal laws, marriage and divorce laws, laws regarding sacrifices in the temple, purity and impurity, etc., etc. Every aspect of Torah is discussed, and laws are analyzed to their most finest point.
So when was the last entries made in the Talmud? When was it decided to close it off? We're not accepting any more submissions?
Yeah, so it was a collaborative effort, more than 1,000 rabbis, over about 20 years to write down the Mishnah. We say Talmud is typically broken down to two parts. You have the Mishnah, and then you have what's called the Gemara or the Talmud, but it's kind of all bunched together today. It was a process over about 300 years, starting with the Mishnah, and ending about the year 500. That's roughly the year with the exact date. I don't know if we know for sure. We know the names of the people: Ravina, Rav Ashi, and a fellow by the name of Bar Rav Ashi. Those are the codifiers. But it was a collaborative effort. It wasn't just one guy on a mission. It was the collective leadership of the people realizing that this had to happen and doing the best job that they can in actually assembling all the information, writing it down in the most coherent way possible. Editing it, we actually have. There's a few books in the Talmud, Nazir and Nidarim. Nidarim talk about vows, like a vow that you make. The Torah talks about when someone promises to do something, has a certain vow. There's 3 different kinds of vows, but when someone has a vow to do something, they're obligated to do so. So there's a book about that called Nidarim. There's a book about Nazir, which is also a similar thing. That's a vow to become a Nazir, which is someone who refrains from wine and from cutting their hair and from coming in contact with dead people for a minimum of 30 days. Those two things, the Talmud itself writes that it wasn't edited a third time. Therefore, it's a little bit incongruent to the rest of the Talmud, like the style, but the style is a little bit different. It went through 2 series of editing and making sure it's uniform with the rest of the Talmud, but didn't have that third round. So you see it's a little bit different. But otherwise, for the rest of the Talmud, we kind of have uniformity. We have the way things are written, the way they're presented. The lingo used is all the same. It's all uniform across all 2,711 pages. Yeah?
So, okay, I don't want to get off track, but I just have one question here. So, at what point was it decided we're done? We're not accepting any more, because obviously things like the Renaissance and the Enlightenment and all of those changes in human history occurred after the Talmud was written, and there could have been scholars and rabbis and others that would have had things and volumes to add to it, but were not able to. So
so the question assumes that there hasn't been any scholarship since then. And remember we talked about Maimonides. We quoted that he, in his introduction to his major book, series of 14 books of Jewish law, he said this is the book of all books, book to end all books. And today, 2014, you cannot go 1 week without a new book being published as a commentary on the Rambam. Not a single week goes by. So the Torah is very dynamic, and it's remarkable that even though we have kind of a finalized version of Bible, a finalized version of the Mishnah, and those things that can't be changed, a finalized version of the Talmud, there's still so much room for scholarship. Just myself, I'm not much of a scholar, but I've written tons and tons and tons of stuff because there's still so much more. The deeper you go, the more room there's room for independent thought, for innovative ideas, for new analyses. It's fantastic. It's
but none of those works have the weight.
Yeah, for sure. But it's working within the framework. Within the framework of the Talmud covered all for what it was trying to do. It left a lot of room for scholarship, and that's what we have today. And there's still a fantastic amount of scholarship. It's remarkable. Tens of thousands of books being published a year. Fantastic. Okay, so that's the vast majority of Talmud. It's halacha. We're trying to reveal what the law is. And then you have Agadata. And you read, and if you're just reading through the Talmud once, and it'll pop out, and you're like, what is going on over here? Right? You'll see things that it has different lingos. It has a different method of instruction, and it's talking about different topics, and the entire way it goes about presenting information is totally different. Now, what's Agarata? It's the philosophical aspects of the Torah. It's the ethical. It's kind of the ideas that aren't law, but kind of perspective, philosophy, ways of behavior, right? Insights into the kind of hidden parts of the Torah. And those things, the exact opposite method was employed, where we're not trying to make it as clear as possible, but we're trying to make it as concealed as possible, as difficult to understand as possible, as hard. And that's why it's frequently masked in the form of parables. You have a story. And the story is a fantastic story about a guy who was on a horse, who's traveling down a river, and meets the man. He says, "Why are you so ugly? Is everyone in your town that ugly?" And the guy says, "Oh, talk to God who created me." And he says, "Oh, all these these illustrations or these analogies." And it's like, what does it mean? Why does it tell us that he's riding on a donkey? All those, every aspect of the information is important, but you don't know what it means. It describes a person who's traveling and it's dark, and he's scared of this, and he's scared of burglars, and he's scared of animals, he's scared of tripping, and then he gets a candle, and then he avoids this, and right? And you have to know what these things mean, and he uses code words that you have no idea what they mean, and it sometimes takes a particular lesson and chops it into three and puts one of this part of the Talmud, one of that part of the Talmud, and one of the third part of the Talmud, and you'll have no idea unless you're a scholar. The idea being that what the architects of the Talmud wanted was that the secrets of the Torah ought not to be dispensed like gumballs. Right? We don't just give out secrets. It's not. So how do they do that? How do you write the secrets? How do you write it in a way that only the people that really deserve to understand them will understand them? Right? That's what they tried to do, and in my view, they did it very successfully. But
why?
What was the purpose? Yeah.
Why would they not want God's wisdom to be disseminated in a way that everyone can digest?
Well, they want people to earn it. They want people to understand it. They want people to, we talk about. I mentioned this a few times, I think before. we talk about Kabbalah. I haven't heard of the term Kabbalah. It's like a very popular, Kabbalah. Oh, the Red Streams and the Kabbalah Center and Madonna, right? All that jazz. Now, the word Kabbalah means, what does the word Kabbalah mean? Who knows what the word Kabbalah means?
To know.
Receiving. And the idea being is that the Kabbalah, what we call the mystical part of the Torah, the Sodot, the hidden aspects of the Torah, those things are something that you receive, right? Those things aren't written down. Those things are you meant to receive it from a teacher because that's the last vestige of complete oral Torah, and it's the hidden it's the deepest of the deep ideas, and we don't want to give it out to people that don't even have a basic understanding or basic background in Jewish learning. It's not meant for them, and when they do have access to it, they twist it and they think that they understand it fully. And therefore they say, and they interpret it, and they misrepresent it as well.
Are you supposed to be a certain age in order to receive?
Yeah, so that's he's supposed to be 40 years old, this and that. I don't know about that. What I know is that my grandfather always said, we don't spend any time with dealing with the hidden aspects of the Torah. Right? Why? Because it doesn't do any good for us. And I think that Agarata and these ideas in the wrong hands, or in maybe not immature in that sense, but kind of hands that aren't ready for it, they won't know what to do with it. It won't do any good for them.
Right, and
they can misrepresent it, and it's the kind of thing where you grow into it. And when you grow into it, then it makes an impact on you. If it was just hand-delivered, spoon-fed to you, you probably wouldn't have the same kind of benefit from it than you would have had if you kind of let it develop within you. The idea I'm saying, the method that I just described of letting idea develop, as my grandfather says. He says that the way to understand what's called a Maimer Chazal, a statement of Chazal, an Agadic teaching, is not to just learn it and try to understand it. Because if you just come head on with it, you won't understand it. It's deliberately designed to make you understand by people that are much more intelligent than you. You're not going to understand it, right? What you have to do is kind of live with it, what he described. You got to basically take the idea and let it just percolate and germinate within you, and then eventually, hopefully, over the course of months, years even, it'll develop into idea, and then it'll be a foundational aspect of your worldview, and then it really builds who you are from learning the Talmudic statement. So the benefit is much greater. My grandfather quoted from his teacher. He said that. It was in the great yeshiva in Poland, Mir Yeshiva, which is a yeshiva that I spent in, right now moved to Israel, no longer in Poland. It's the only yeshiva in Europe that survived the war completely intact. The entire yeshiva made their way east and was 5 years in Shanghai. It's just a remarkable story how they all got visas somehow, the entire yeshiva in its entirety wasn't disrupted. So his teacher in the Mir, when it was still in Poland in 1936, 1935, somewhere around there. So there was this guy in the yeshiva who had come up with this incredible Torah insight and was basically like buzzing. Like the whole yeshiva was buzzing about this idea, or this discourse that this guy gave with this novel Torah insight. So Rabbi Rucham, who was my grandfather's Rebbe, my grandfather's teacher, he went over to him and said to him, how long did you spend working on this idea, on this discourse that the whole yeshiva is buzzing about? He says, 5 hours. Oh, 5 hours. He says, tell me, the most recent lecture that I gave, how long do you think I spent on it? How long? He says, probably about the same thing, about 5 hours. He said to him, it wasn't 5 hours. It wasn't 5 days. It was 5 months. It was 5 months. 5 months I was developing this idea. So I'm telling the story because that's kind of an illustration of how to go about, one method perhaps, of going about trying to unlock the secrets of an agadic statement if you encounter one of them. And the one that we're going to stress today is one that I feel very fond of because I kind of was very bothered by this particular piece of Talmud. It didn't make any sense to me. And over the course of time, I kind of gained some insight that hopefully we'll share today. Okay, after that introduction, let's read the statement of the Talmud. I'll read it in Hebrew first, and then we'll read it in English. Shlosha me'ein olam haba. Elohim, Shabbos, Shemesh, Tashmish. Tashmish Dmai. Ilimah Tashmish Amita Hamikhash Kחיש. Elo Tashmish Nekavim. It's about, 12 words. 3 things are a measure of the world to come. And they are, number 1, Shabbos. Number 2, the sun. Number 3, Tashmish. The word Tashmish is ambiguous. It can mean multiple things. So the Talmud says, which Tashmish are you talking about? If you say that it means intercourse, then it can't be so because that weakens. That makes someone weak. Rather, it must mean removing one's bowels. That's what it says. That's the Talmud. That's it. And it goes on to some other thing. Right? And it talks about 3 things are a measure of something else. That's all it says. And this is from Brachos 57b. If you happen to find a Talmud in English, you can read it. That's all it says. I didn't add or subtract anything. And when you read this, a bunch of questions pop up. A few basic questions. What were we saying? There's 3 things that are a measure of the world to come. There's 3 things that are, what does that mean? What does the world to come mean? What does it mean that there's 3 things that are a measure of the world to come? 3 things that are similar, that are like, that are kind of a me'ain. Me'ain means it's a measure. It's a little bit of. What does that mean? Right? What are we talking about when we say the world to come? That is actually a. Those words don't appear anywhere in the Jewish Bible. Nowhere. Olam haba, which means olam means the world, like tikkun olam, fixing the world. Haba, the next world, or world to come. Versus olam hazeh, this world. These are words that don't appear anywhere in the Jewish Bible. They appear rather infrequently in the the literature, in the Talmud. What is this thing? And if it's so important, it's this whole world, well, why doesn't it not say it anywhere in the Bible? It seems like it's a fundamental part of Jewish philosophy. In fact, Maimonides in his 13 principles, one of the 13 principles is the world to come. So why is it not anywhere in the Jewish Bible?
Is it the Messianic age?
No, the Messianic age is plenty in the Jewish Bible.
Okay.
So that's a very good question.
They're not the same thing?
Oh no. In fact, there's a Talmud that we're going to another statement from elsewhere in the Talmud that we're going to bring that says as follows. I'll say it now because it's relevant now, but it'll be relevant later as well. All the prophets, you look at the prophet Isaiah and the prophet Ezekiel and the prophet Jeremiah, and they talk about this future time, right? Really good, right? Really good times. It's to be peace and prosperity and health and happiness for everyone. They foretell about this future time. It's to be really good. Kol Anavim, all the prophets did not prophesize for the days of the Messianic era. All the good things that we're told about in the future, that's going to happen in the future, is only for the Messianic era. But for Olam Haba, but for the world to come, Ayin lo ra'ata, and eye doesn't see it, only God sees it. And I can't see it. So even the prophets, with their vision and their foresight and their scholarship and their piety and their insight and their wisdom, they couldn't see what the world to come is. And all they could see was what's going to be Messianic times. So yes, there's distinct, we call them epochs, or eras, or kind of phases in time. One of them we call Olam Hazeh, and then the Messianic era is kind of very similar to Olam Hazeh. It's just this world minus a few. Okay, so what's the world to come? How come we don't hear about it in the Bible? That's one question we would ask. Another question we would ask: what does it mean that something is presented as a measure of the world? What does that mean? What does it mean that it's a measure? It's a small part. It's mini world to come. It's like the mini iPad mini. It's like, oh, this is the world to come. This is just a smaller version. It's the same thing. It's just a smaller screen. Is that what it is? Or not? What do you guys say? It is?
No, it's a description.
It's a description? Reflection? It's a taste, okay. It's something like that. Remember, we just quoted to Dan, even the prophets have no idea what the world to come is. Even they can't see it. Their eye can't see it. Only God can see it. So it's clearly not the same thing. It's clearly not experiences that we could experience the world to come in this world. Clearly not. What it's saying is it's some sort of feeling. It's inkling. It's like a measure. We call it a measure. There's some commonality between these three experiences where you can kind of have some sort of insight into what we're talking about. We talk about this world to come. And lastly, obviously, what is the commonality? What does the sun have to do with anything? That's obviously a basic question. What does Shabbos have to do with anything? What is, going to the bathroom? What does that have to do with anything? And lastly, the last question, my favorite question, is that if you actually analyze what we're saying here, we're saying a statement, three things of the world to come. We give the names of the three items, and then we say the last item. Well, what does it mean? It's an ambiguous noun. Does it mean this or does it mean that? Why does the Talmud not simplify it and say three things are a measure of the world to come? Shabbos, Shemish, and Tashmish and Kavim. Tell us which Tashmish we're talking about, and that's it. Why did they say Tashmish? They say, Tashmish can be multiple things. Is it this kind of Tashmish, that kind of Tashmish? Well, it can't be that kind of Tashmish because that makes you eat. It must be referring to that. Why? Take out that whole dialogue. Right? Take out the whole discussion. Just tell us which noun you're referring to. Say Tashmish and Kavim, that's it. Finito. You don't need to say any more. You like it? You like the questions?
No, that's all right. You're doing good.
I'm doing good. Thank you. Okay.
Keep on.
So,
You'll be great at that for this course.
So we have to figure out what they have in common, all three different things. Shabbos, the light.
or not necessarily that they have in common, or maybe these are three elements where there's some commonality to a third party, to the world to come. That is. Perhaps what we're saying is like this. Now, our class here has a special affinity for Maimonides, right? We had the whole class discussing what Maimonides. So we're going to try to invoke a lot of what he wrote about the world to come as kind of a basis for our understanding of this idea. Olam haba, world to come, Maimonides calls it Olam HaNeshama. What's so funny, Andrea?
I'm not going to say. Just keep going.
Okay.
I'm just going to keep it to myself.
Okay. Okay, so Maimonides calls it Olam HaNeshamot, the world of souls. And the first thing that we know about this world is that there's no physicality. We do have, from the other end of the Talmud, actually not from the other Talmud, but from exactly 40 and a half pages before this statement, we find the following statements. In the world to come, there's no eating, drinking, washing, anointing, sexual intercourse. What is there? The righteous sit with their crowns on their head, enjoying the radiance of the divine presence. So, first thing we're told about it, or one of the things that we're told about it, there's a lack of spirit. There's a lack of physicality. There's no bodies. There's no bodily activities. It's some sort of immersion in this spiritual radiance. Okay, that's the first thing that we know about it. Now, for us to try to imagine a bodiless existence is very hard. It's very hard. Our perspective, our way of seeing the world, our senses are all physical. They're all physical. Our interactions with everything, they're physical, right? Even our brain, our consciousness, we see it in physical terms, It's hard for us to imagine what it means that we have just a soul. Like, what are we? How do we exist? Like, what does that mean? What does that mean? What's an angel? I don't know what an angel is. Okay, so
You got wings.
But they don't, from what I've read, is that they don't eat either.
that's absolutely
Yeah.
true.
There's
Yeah,
no
but
sex in the angels. No
that's
male,
true.
Female.
That's exactly true. So therefore, it's very hard for us to imagine it. And this is underscored by another statement in Maimonides. And I think I mentioned his point before. I'll actually read it inside now. To us, to try to understand or try to imagine what it's like to be just souls is basically trying to ask a blind person to imagine what color is. Right? I've given that example. It's actually brought down from this Maimonides. I'll read this quote from the Maimonides. No. That just as the blind man cannot image color, as the deaf person cannot experience sounds, and as the eunuch cannot feel sexual desire, So too bodies cannot attain spiritual light. This is not an exact translation. This is Maimonides wrote this book in Arabic. It was translated to Hebrew. This is a translation that I pulled from the internet in English. It's actually a very good translation, but it's not like attained. It's not perfect necessarily. Like fish who do not know what the element of fire, so are the delights of the spiritual world unknown in this material world. Spiritual delights do not come within our experience at all. It's not something we can experience. We enjoy only bodily pleasures, which come to us through our physical senses, such as the pleasure of eating, drinking, and sexual intercourse. Other levels of delight are not present in our experience. We neither recognize nor grasp them at first thought. They come to us only after great searching. So what he's telling us is that this idea of spiritual pleasure, spiritual existence, is something that's beyond really our perspective. It's something like a blind person cannot really understand it. At the end, he throws in this last line, they come to us only after great searching. So that's basically opening up the door for some sort of interaction that we can have with this kind of experience after great searching. But the takeaway for us is that our senses do not link with our soul. If I give you a little, you feel that, right?
Oh, yes.
You feel it. Why do you feel that? Because you have a sense. Right? The Almighty gave your body this heightened sense of awareness that when someone touches you, when you taste something, when you're hungry, what happens? Your stomach growls. If you're walking through the Sahara Desert and you haven't had water in 5 hours, your throat is parched and you might be getting a little bit delirious. Okay? If you eat something, it tastes good and you feel that. Okay? If you're engaging in some sort of audiovisual experience, you're watching television or you're watching your kids play soccer, right? You see it. It comes within you via your senses. Right? You're tasting something right now, right? It tastes it. You feel it. That is what we are today. We're bodies first, souls second. We don't feel our souls. When we feel awkward doing mitzvahs because it doesn't make sense to our bodies. There's no benefit to our bodies when we shake a lulav. We had a lulav shaking experience here. You shake a lulav and you do feel a little weird. Why? Because for your body there's no measurable change. It doesn't make any sense to your body. For your body, you're just taking a bunch of you're taking a fruit and a bunch of branches and you're shaking them and you hope no one's looking at you because it looks a little weird. You know, and that's what the body, because that's the body's perspective. And doesn't do anything for the body. Doesn't. And we don't have an ability to tap into our souls or to experience what our soul feels, and therefore we don't know that this is very valuable for our soul. Now, if things were flipped around, right? If things were flipped around, the first thing that would happen is that after 24 hours, most of humanity would die. Why? Because they would die of thirst. If you didn't feel the urge to have thirst, if you didn't feel that thirst, you probably would be dead. Probably. Thank God the Almighty created us with all these safety gaps that as our body needs things, right, we feel it. And therefore we keep our body alive. We survive because the Almighty gives us all these bodily experiences. But our soul is parallel to our body. We're told that we have 365 sinews and 248 limbs, and the corresponding amount of mitzvahs. 248 positive mitzvahs and 365 negative mitzvahs corresponding to the limbs of the body. We're told additionally that there's spiritual limbs as well. And there's an exact mirror image kind of between the body and the soul. Right? The soul exists and it has kind of these elements, what we might call limbs, and they gain nourishment from the mitzvahs, just like our body gains nourishment from what we consume. You eat and it gives you, or you consume oxygen, you have water, and all those things, your body breaks down all the nutrients and the minerals and the vitamins and kind of gives life to your whole body. That exact parallel happens, and hopefully will happen in our spiritual body as well, which we call our soul. We don't have a sensory connection to it, and therefore it's kind of a foreign idea to us. In this world to come, we are just souls. We are just souls. We don't have that whole body, the whole body thing, and therefore this reality is kind of hard for us to imagine. But that's what it is basically. It's a world where we don't have bodies, we don't do the body themes, we're just souls. It's the opportunity for, like we mentioned, pleasure, like this spiritual pleasure. It's also the place for, it's reward and punishment, basically. It's this. Well, I'll get to the second thing. It's this place for reward and punishment, where we mentioned this a few times here, that we don't believe that reward and punishment is meted out in this world, right? There's no way that Hitler could have paid for all his evil in this world. It's not possible, you know. And if you accept the idea of a soul, by definition, you're accepting the idea of reward and punishment in a different world when all rights can be wronged and all wronged can be righted. Yes, Dan.
So the world to come is after the Messianic era. When's the resurrection part? Explain to me this timeline.
Okay.
Resurrection, where
So I can try to explain the timeline, but I don't know for sure because I don't believe it says it anywhere explicitly. It doesn't. I don't believe it says it anywhere explicitly what the exact time. It doesn't go out of its way to make it easier for us. It seems like to me that right now we live in this world, basically. This world. We live on a planet. We live part of a solar system. We're in a galaxy. Right? We have bodies. Right? That's basically. We know what this world is basically. At some point in time, there's going to be some change to this world. A minor change, most likely be a minor change, where it's going to be that the idea of God is going to be ubiquitous in the world. I think we're already more than halfway home. This is the vast majority of the world. If you take a snapshot of the world today versus a snapshot of the world maybe 2,000 years ago, it's remarkable how the vast majority of the world today has this idea of God, basically, the basic idea of God, in some sense, down pat. You know, so yes, the Christians have their kind of, their forking, so to speak, of the idea, and the Muslims kind of have their application of that idea. And but the idea of God has made tremendous inroads, since the days of Abraham.
You mean monotheistic God?
Yeah, monotheistic God. Now, you'll say, but the Christian God is not really monotheistic because they have the whole tripod thing.
No, I wouldn't.
Okay, I'm saying, but it's close enough that if it gets tweaked a little bit, it's already the Jewish idea of God.
No, you just still have a population on this planet that doesn't have this idea.
Yes, that's true. That's true. But that idea of the world that knows God, we're very close to it. And the idea of Mashiach, Messiah or Messianic era, is this kind of maturation of this world, where this world kind of reaches a point where the people recognize that God exists, they recognize the Jewish people's role in contributing to that, and it's a certain degree of stability where the Jews are able to study Torah, and there's no hindrances to that. So it's basically we could exist in our land, going back to Israel. Like we're already there, We're already 6 million Jews in Israel. If we told you this 100 years ago, you wouldn't believe me if I told you there'd be 6 million Jews living in Israel, with having a sovereign state there, right? It's already beginning, kind of all the the different puzzle pieces are getting kind of assembled. We're not quite there, but we're almost there.
Isn't it like a process though? It's like right now we're like in exile.
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
It's getting to know the roots and everything, going back.
Yeah, so I think it is a process. We also believe that Mashiach, the idea, could happen overnight. It could happen very fast. It could happen remarkably fast. But I think we look at just at the situation the way it is today, and the Jewish people the way they are today. It kind of makes sense to us how it could be developing.
And the Messianic era will be like the cleansing time where everything will get to the point that we're ready to receive the world to come, right? Or could it be that way? Or
it could be. And now I'll tell you why I'm saying what I'm saying. We have this tradition. Call it tradition. I don't know if it's explicit anywhere. That if you look at the works of Maimonides, it's written in conceptual order, like from most important to least important. What's the first thing Maimonides discusses? Believing in God. foundations of Torah. He spends the first chapter basically dealing with Jewish theology. First 4 chapters. And he goes on to believe in, and then he talks about the laws of character and the laws of Torah. Basically dealing with tshuva, repentance, right? Believing in this one God and not believing in any other gods. That's basically the beginning of Maimonides. If you fast forward all the way to the end, the last 2 chapters and all the Maimonides, out of the 1,000 chapters of Maimonides, the last thing is talking about Mashiach. So I always put this as kind of basically Maimonides telling us that this is not so important. And he himself writes it. He says, listen, don't spend too much time in it because we don't know. We don't know what's going to be, and it's not really relevant to us. Huh?
Because it ain't gonna
But it's already happening in some measure, You could have said 100 years ago the Jews going back to Israel is foretold in the Torah. It's never happened. A nation exiled from the land, reestablishing sovereignty in their ancestral homeland. Has that ever happened? It also never happened, but it was predicted in the Torah and it happened. So, a lot of these. So how far is it? How far are they from actually, kind of clearing away Temple Mount and building a temple and kind of, telling the world that we're here to stay? It's not so far. We can't imagine in the next 50 years it could happen.
And people finding out they're Jewish and they didn't realize it's from other ancestors and they're connecting back.
Yeah, a lot, and there's been a tremendous influx to the Jewish people, almost like never before. Like over the past 1,000 years, today, like converts are just flooding to the Jewish people from everywhere. It's tremendous. Either way,
I found out the nonsensical part of these other religions. They see what the truth is. It's coming out. The Jewish religion.
Yeah, I think so. And then I think there are people like myself, and I think others too, that are just lost Spanish Jews that went off into other cultures and other people, and through the generations converted to Christianity and got lost and then come back.
If you can, in your particular instance, you can trace back to that?
Mine has an infant adoption intermingled, which makes it complicated. As far as marriage and birth certificates, I can take my mother's father's family into Mexico, and then I can take their names and I can link their names to family names on synagogue rolls in Spain. And then I've also done DNA testing.
Someone did the research.
When I look, basically when I did DNA testing, he did it too, went into a database that hooked me up with currently living relatives who share my DNA. And you can self-identify what your religion is. And basically my relatives who live in Spain and Portugal are Jewish. My relatives who live in Mexico are Catholic and Jewish. And my relatives in the U.S. are everything in the world. So it's kind of, I don't have birth certificates taking my family line specifically back to a Jewish family in Spain, but I've got lots of circumstantial evidence, and so I converted. So, yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like you did some Ancestry.com.
Years.
Yeah, wow, fantastic. Did the DNA
What is the
testing.
website?
Ancestry,
I did
23andMe.
I did my DNA testing through 23andMe,
23andMe,
and
yeah.
then the paper trail basically is working with my grandfather's adoption records and Ancestry.com and family trees built by relatives I found through 23andMe.
Fantastic.
And the Mormons actually have gigantic databases. Like the Mormons are making it their job to pull birth, death, and marriage records from all over the world and digitize them, and they're available for free. And so that's where I'm getting most of my stuff from Mexico.
Cool.
But it's an issue of going page
So
by
your
page.
Mexican paperwork is coming from Salt Lake City,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
No, I mean,
the Mormons,
that's
the
where
Mormons
you
are
go.
digitizing Mexican records, and they're well into the 1800s now. And so
Very
Why
interesting.
are they good? I mean, the Mormons...
Because they
started
need to
around
know-
the Mormons,
1820.
the
No,
Mormons
they need to know your
believe-
ancestry, so retroactively convert them, right?
Right, yeah. The Mormons believe that you can baptize a dead person and get them into heaven. And so they want to be able to find all the relatives
I got
to
you.
make
There was a big hullabaloo about that
because
recently.
they did Anne Frank.
Yeah, they were
Yeah.
posthumously converting all these people.
Yeah.
Nonsense.
Either way, the records are nice and they're free.
So,
You don't care about Anne, but the means are useful, right?
Yeah.
that's fascinating.
But I think the Messiah question, there's a phrase that people can, somebody is so heavenly minded that they're of no earthly good. And I think that's kind of a useful way for looking at how much emphasis you should put on worrying about the Messiah, because we don't have enough evidence to draw any serious conclusions. It's a great thing to think about.
Yeah, but I'm
it's
saying
not going to impact your daily life.
Maimonides tells us, listen, this is a belief that we have.
Yeah.
It's been part of the Jewish philosophy and perspective for millennia. Mm-hmm. We believe it, but we don't know anything about it.
Right.
And there's debate and as to what actually changes.
Yeah.
And therefore, it's not important. And it's the last thing I'm going to tell you about because you got to know it, but it's not that important.
Yeah.
You know.
It doesn't impact your
and
daily
it's
life.
it's like it's remarkable because what's the second to last thing that he brings? The laws of Gentiles, like what Gentiles need to know, and the 7 Noahide laws, etc. And this is a book written for Jews. I always say, like, Maimonides is writing a book for Jews, and he's telling you it's more important for you to know what other people need to do than Gentiles need to do than the idea of Messiah. It's not so important. It's not so. It's important, but it's not. But it shouldn't make a practical difference in how you live your life. Because you don't really. You have to do what you need to do in this world. To make sure that you're doing your job. So that's what we talk about Messiah. We talk about this Olam Haba. It seems like it's some future world, not necessarily on planet Earth. Soulful world. I don't know where it exists, or maybe does it need to exist? I don't know. Does it need to exist in a place? I don't know. I have no idea how it works. Okay. I'm saying it's not what happens after you die.
Okay. But there's discussion of the resurrection, which I know goes into
yes,
a bunch of stuff. So
yes.
that happens after the Messianic era and before the world.
It seems like it's afterwards.
Okay.
Right. Okay. This world Messianic era, resurrection, next world. We also have this another thing called La'asid Lavo in the future, which is a undefined future. Bernie, what's not that funny?
It's not funny. No, I'm just very cynical.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not laughing.
Yeah, but remember, the Torah has never been proven wrong. Never. And it made such bold predictions. It went out of its way to say things that are so incredibly unlikely to have happened. And it recounts. It has accounts, documented accounts of people witnessing fantastic things. And those like for example, the manna falling from heaven, right? According to the book, you just read the book. The Jews consumed manna for 40 years. How many people? Millions of people. Oh, did this happen or not? Well, those same people got the book, right? Moses delivers the book to them. They subsequently observed the whole Torah, right? Why would they observe the Torah if it was all bunk, right?
Well, except they say that Moses in 1400 or so BCE.
Yes.
Okay. And then we have here he's written down he knew how to write. Writing occurred way before that. Then the Bible or the Torah wasn't really written until around 500 or 600 BC. What
come
happened
on.
in 800 years?
Come on.
It changed. Other people wrote this.
Don't. There's.
Don't what?
Okay, like this. Okay, this is funny because the first time I gave a class here, we got into the argument. What was the guy's name? Neil. Norm. So we got sidetracked with the whole documentary hypothesis thing. Okay, so we could argue. There's some the textual evidence presented by German scholars who learned Hebrew when they were 20, with totally discounting any of the traditional Jewish perspective or any of the Jewish literature outside the book itself. They want to say that there's multiple authors, there's different names. That's a bunch of baloney. Come on. That's. Let's assume that there's some textual inconsistencies. Let's assume that's true. The Torah still makes predictions that are so remarkable and one of a kind and have come true. That alone should be enough. Forget about the textual. I'm saying that's an argument that we could have. We can't really settle it here today because. But let's say there are some textual because every single one of them has been answered by the Talmud. It's just the scholars say we're not looking at the Talmud, we're looking at the book as a single standalone document, and therefore we're going to treat it like like any other book, and therefore we're going to say, oh, there's some sort of this. It says the different names of God. It repeats various stories. Well, you open the Talmud, it says, well, it says the story again for this purpose. They totally discredit. They don't even look at it. And a few basic principles that every fourth grade kid in Israel knows, they rejected, like the idea of the Torah being nonlinear or not chronological. So if it says, oh, Abraham's father died and then afterwards it says that Abraham was 75, but wait a minute, according to the age, it claims that there's basic mathematical problems because it doesn't understand that the Torah is was never intended to be accepted as chronological. So, but besides for that, the Torah, let's see, for example, makes a prediction that the Jewish people will always remain few in number, will be exiled from the land, will be scattered through the nation, will come back to Israel. That has happened in human history a grand total of twice. Once, when the Jews were exiled after the first temple was destroyed, and once this century, right? Why? Because there's patterns. When nations get conquered, and they get either swallowed up or they can disappear. And it's happened thousands of times. That has happened thousands of times. Where there's assimilation, there's the melting pot, and they disappear. They lose their distinct identity. The Torah says that Jewish people will always stay around. They'll always be small in number. They won't overwhelm their anyone else. Always face hatred and anti-Semitism and marginalization, and that's also been true. Yet will survive and come back to Israel and establish a state. Like that's a prediction the Torah makes that no one could deny. Wherever you make all the textual analyses, it's a prediction made at least 2,200 years ago, because then we know for sure that the Torah is that old because it was translated to secular hands, right? And then it happened, and we see today with the gift of retrospect that it actually happened. So that's something to me that if you have an ancient book that, according to what it itself says, right? If it says that it was delivered to the people that saw Moses, that's what it says. Moses gave them the Torah, right? And it's remarkable that it makes these predictions. That's just one prediction that it makes, but it makes multiple predictions that have come true, totally, and we can see it today. Right? I think it's short-sighted to just discredit it because some German scholar in the 1870s said, "Oh, it says the name of God is Elohim and the name of God as the tetragram. Oh, it must be those different authors merged together." I think it's a simplistic way of doing it, and also, I think that it undermines the whole religion. The second that it's then why are we living as Jews? It's just the works of some men who came up with it, and maybe very intelligent men, but they came up with it, and why should we follow their word? Why does their word have any validity? Yeah, okay, but if you actually analyze and you investigate and you ponder the evidence, it's remarkable. It's remarkable. And I think the only way for it to actually not be true is that you have some of the most brilliant people on the planet. Because any way you slice it, the Torah is just way ahead of its time in being a systemized, structured way of living. It's a work that has not been matched yet. And even if it was written in the 5th century BC, before the Common, even if it was written by the most brilliant, or one of the most brilliant, a collection of the most brilliant people around, because it is the greatest, law systemizer.
I don't disagree with that it was written by all these, scholars, et cetera. My issue is that God, speaking to Moses, gave him the thing, and they really, he told him just before he died, he gave all this stuff. It's a nice story.
Yeah, but remember, and it's also, this is another important point. We're the only religion that is based upon a national revelation. Every other religion starts off as one man claiming to have some sort of divine inspiration, divine connection, right? Prophecy. Every single religion starts the same way. Right? Our religion says that there was 3 million people. Depends how you learn 3 million, because it says 603,500 adult males between the age of 20 and 60. So you assume it's at least 2 million people that experienced with their own eyes. They all saw it. It's repeated multiple times in the Torah, and the Torah even itself says another great prediction from the Torah, where it says that no other religion will ever claim to have the formation of their religion to be similar to ours. So I'm saying these are enough remarkable things that at least make you question what you read in some book that says that of course the Torah is a bunch of nonsense.
Well, no, I didn't say that.
The evidence is overwhelming. Yes.
To be a class on its own.
I'm still thinking about what you said about the world and the sun and the.
Yeah, I know. That's what we started. Okay, let's.
Lasted about 1 second.
Yes.
But I mean, I'm trying to.
Okay. Let's go. So let us start with these three things. So we have this idea of a world to come. We don't know much about it. We know that it's a spiritual world. That's what we know about it. It's a world of having spiritual pleasure, spiritual delights. It's beyond our capacity. There's three things in this world that are a measure of it. What's the first thing? Shabbos. So what I found, just as kind of a way to follow up with Dan's question, when we started off the history discussions, we said, the Talmud said that this world is 6,000 years. That's it. There's an end point. We count from Adam, what happened before Adam. I don't want to get a discussion about that. It might have been 13 billion years, whatever. From Adam was when we start counting history, and from Adam till 6,000 years is that's when this world exists for. Right? Doesn't go beyond that. We have a time, by the way. Our claim is it could be means tested. We have an end point. We know that it cannot exist past in its current form past the year 6,000. We're also told that every day of God equals 1,000 years. It's a verse in Psalms. There are those that claim that if you take a look at the 6 days of creation, each one of those 6 days corresponds to 1,000 years. And the Shabbos, well, that's the next world. That's the next world. There's this world and then there's the next world. The idea being that there's some sort of parallel, but not only just in the ideas, but also in the structure between the six kind of ordinary versus one special, one otherworldly, one supernatural. But what about Shabbos? What about Shabbos that we could experience today? So we find a verse, we find a statement that says as follows: Mi shetarach be'erev Shabbos, yochal b'Shabbos. Mi shetarach be'erev Shabbos, me'echen yochal b'Shabbos. What this means is like this: he who toils before Shabbos gets to consume on Shabbos. But if someone doesn't prepare for Shabbos, what is he going to eat? What is he going to eat in Shabbos? The idea being, we know that if anyone observes Shabbos today, you know that there's an end point. Shabbos starts at 5:08. Everything has to be ready for the entire Shabbos before 5:08. You have to have all your food ready. The house has to be perfectly clean. Everything has to be ready. You got to have the hot water prepared. You got to have the candles prepared. You got to be dressed for Shabbos, ready to go to the shul. Everything has to be done. Right? It's a day of action. It's a day of. It's a hectic day. It's a day where you have to get everything done for Friday and for Saturday. Comes Shabbos, in a second it changes. Suddenly it's all about consuming. Everything, all the hard work that you did on Friday, you're able to experience that on Shabbos. The change that happens between Friday and Shabbos is Friday the day of action, of working. Shabbos is the day of consumption. Shabbos is the day of enjoying the fruits of your work. We're told also, additionally, the world to come is not a world where you can do any mitzvahs. Right? You cannot do any mitzvahs. You can't. Only in this world you can do. This is the world of work. This is where you work. This is where you accomplish. The second that change happens from this world to next world, it's about consuming. Whatever you did, whatever work you did, whatever toil you invested, that's what you have. Right? If you didn't take care of making hot soup, you don't have any hot soup for Shabbos. You don't have that corresponding spiritual reality for Shabbos. So yes, Shabbos presents to us, if you experience the whole process from going from Friday to Shabbos, you experience what basically happens on the spiritual sense. This world is a world which we are told in the Mishnah, in Pirkei Avot. The Mishnah says, in Chapters of Fathers, this world to next world is like a corridor to a hall. A hall as in a ballroom versus a hall as a corridor. This world to next world. Halama Zeh is comparable to a pathway to next world. Right? We're here to get there. Whatever we invest here, we're able to consume there. That's the idea. So yes, there is some sort of parallel, because just like we have this change between preparing, working, and consuming between Friday and Shabbos, we have that same thing between this world and next world. Has the same modality. It's about work here. It's about sweat here. It's about doing as many bits as you can. It's about preparing yourself for all the spiritual goodness that you could possibly accomplish. Next world is where you enjoy that. Whatever you prepared, that's where you're able to consume. Now, in our view, we look at reward very differently than the way the Jewish philosophy looks at it. We look at it, if someone gets really good, someone gets an A, you tell a kid, you get an A, you get a lollipop, or you get a bicycle, you get an iPad, right? That's the way we view things. It's like you do this, and then you get that. The Torah is telling us that our actions in this world are rewarded in next world. However, the reward is very similar to what happens between Friday and Shabbos. Right? When you eat your food Friday night that you prepare on Friday afternoon, is it a reward? Is it like a lollipop that you would give someone to give for getting the A? No. You're just consuming what you prepared. The idea being that our mitzvahs is like our preparation of a food that we consume. We consume the actual thing. That means there's no disconnect between the action that brings about the reward and the reward itself. The reward, in fact, is the consuming of their action. We're told many times that doing a mitzvah creates a certain spiritual reality that can be consumed in a world where all you have is spiritual. All you have is spiritual life, so therefore all you consume is spirituality as well. So that's that. We're told. Additionally, back to Pirkei Avot. I'll say this really quickly because I want to finish everything. So, I'll skip it. Let's go to the next thing. The sun. I have another idea here. So we have this idea of preparing and consuming. We have another idea that I like to call it's experiential. What do Maimonides tell us? You want to know what Lamabad is? Right? You're a blind person. It's color. Right? Unless you've experienced it, you have no idea what you're talking about. And people talk about Shabbos, like Shabbos. Okay, so what are we doing here? We're refraining from 39 categories of work for 25 hours. That's what it is. And that sounds very bland. It sounds like where is there meaning in that? What's the meaning? Like, how does that work? You could talk about it. You could describe it, but what does that mean? Like, how is there any meaning for it? How do people who observe it? Why do they swear by it? What does it mean? They mean unless you've experienced it, you don't understand it. In Judaism, typically, we're this is my perspective. Others might argue. The Hasidic movement probably would disagree with what I'm saying right now. We're an intelligence first, understanding something first, brain first, heart second kind of religion. We're very much based upon understanding. We're very rational. We try to understand things. Right? It has to make sense for us. It has to be reasonable for us. If it makes sense, if it's logical, then we can proceed to try to feel it. Shabbos, everything turns upside down. There's no way to understand it unless you experience it. If I gave you a cookie, I say, this cookie is the best cookie around. It's very moist. It's very sweet. It's very crunchy. And you say, oh, wow, I want to experience that. So there's two ways you can actually go about experiencing that. You can either, take it, make a bracha, and eat it. Right? That's one way you can experience it. Or you can send it to your friend who has a laboratory and tell him, I want you to take take the thing and chop it up and analyze it and do tests on it, and then after 4 hours of work, I'll say, listen, I measured it, right? And this is what it is. It's sweet, it's crunchy, it's creamy, whatever. There's two ways to do that, right? What's obviously the preferable way? To taste it.
Yeah, eat it.
To experience it. Shabbos is like that cookie. We could talk about all the laws of Shabbos, and we can get to very, very minute aspects of very particular laws. And the book of Shabbos is a fantastic book, 156 pages. Each page is just replete with laws and laws and laws and laws of perspective. Or we can try to experience it.
The 156 pages, this is Maimonides?
No. The book of the Talmud.
Oh, in the Talmud.
The Talmud, yes. And it's a certain thing that we're told, that it's like Olam Haba. If you really want to understand it, you have to experience. So in a way, the connection that we're making to Shabbos and Olam Haba, the first thing that we said was that we're learning more about Olam Haba. Now we're learning more about Shabbos, right? Because now we know that it's still so funny. I can't handle it. It's crazy.
Keep going. Don't look at me.
I'm sorry. Now we know that that Shabbos is something that is kind of similar to Olam Haba because we don't really understand unless you've experienced it. And you've talked to people who have experienced it, and then they get it. You know? There's a great story brought down in the Talmud again, also from the book of Shabbos, where it talks about this Roman. Talmud has a lot of stories about Romans because that's when the Romans were dominating the world. The time was written, so a lot of the rabbis have personal experiences with them. Like we were told multiple times about the relationship that Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, Rabbi Judah the Prince, had with Marcus Aurelius Antoninus. He's called Antoninus, and the Romans call him the Talmud calls him Antoninus. So here it tells a story about this one Roman who came to one of the rabbis and said, "How come the aroma of Shabbos food is so fantastic?" So he said to him, "We have a special spice called Shabbos." He says, "Give it to me. Give it to me." So he says, "It only works for those who observe the Shabbos. Only if you observe the Shabbos could you actually have that special sense." The idea being that even to the food of Shabbos, there's this certain undefinable quality that Shabbos contributes that makes the food taste so good. And you kind of, the famous, has anyone here ever tasted cholent?
Mm-hmm.
What? Cholent. You tasted it?
Yeah, I made it.
You made it.
What is it?
It's like this stew.
Mm-hmm.
It's this cholent. It's a Shabbos. That's a Shabbos stew. In fact, it's been a tradition to make cholent. It's a Jewish tradition. Basically, what it is, Dave's gonna look here. It's potatoes and beans and meat and barley and spices and whatever.
An egg.
It's put on a slow cooker and
Cooks all day.
It sounded like, the word sounded like the wool and linen thing.
Shatnez. That's funny. Yeah. Now, the reason why, by the way, it's actually brought down in Jewish law that we're supposed to have hot food on Shabbos because we talked about the Sadducees. Remember we talked about the Sadducees last time? The Tzedokim Sadducees? I don't know, we didn't talk about
We
that.
talked
Okay.
about Karaites.
Oh, the Karaites.
But they'll
So
sit
these
in
were
the
people
dark.
that talk that they sit in the dark, exactly, and they don't have any hot food because they take the words of the Torah literally, and they reject any oral interpretation. Therefore, it says, don't have any fire on Shabbos, so they don't know heat, no electricity, no hot foods. So kind of to show that we don't believe that if you put the light on before Shabbos, or you put the food on before Shabbos, you're allowed to eat it. That's why there's been a tradition, essentially brought down in Jewish law, where you should eat hot food on Shabbos. Hence the cholent. But if you try to make that on a Tuesday, it doesn't have the same, it doesn't taste the same on a Tuesday. It just doesn't. It doesn't have that special Shabbos flavor. It doesn't have it, And is there words to describe it? I don't know. I don't know if there's any word. It's kind of an experience.
You're trying to ascribe.
You're going to have, and you yearn, and maybe those that complete the whole Sabbath, they yearn to have, they look forward to it, the smells.
With the smell of the food?
Yeah.
Why would the food smell different on Tuesday than it does on Shabbos? Because there's
you're
this
doing
spice that
other
we're told
things-
about.
You're doing other things
Because you're in that
You're in that,
thought
that
mode.
state.
Maybe. Or we can try to understand that. Or yes, there's something
I think the
that we...
turkey sound tastes better on Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
than on
it's a good point.
Well, there is another mystery. Why does a Reuben sandwich taste better in Brooklyn than in Houston, right?
Well, maybe it's better. Well,
You know something? We were in Keystone, South Dakota, and the guy, it wasn't kosher corned beef, but it was a fantastic Reuben this guy made in Keystone, South Dakota.
okay. Okay, there's another one about Shabbos.
Very necessary to say that, wasn't it?
You got to quit, Rabbi. We want to hear about the sun.
We're gonna get to the sun.
We're gonna get to the end of it.
We will get to the end of it. I guarantee it.
I want to know about bowel movements.
Okay, so we said this is a third way that I came up with understanding this. Perhaps is that we're told, we describe that spiritual activities fill out a character for us. Like for us, we're bodies first and souls second. You know, I want to describe this as, you know, the soul. The soul's in the body. I'm sorry, is in the driver's seat. And where's the soul? Where's the soul? Daniel, where's the soul? The soul's like in the trunk, like in the first scene of Goodfellas. Yeah. It's like in the trunk there. That's where the soul is for us. The soul, like, it doesn't really, like, we don't feel, it doesn't resonate within us. In the world to come, everything's flipped about. The body is a non-factor, it's insignificant. The soul's in the driver's seat. So, is there any kind of experience that we could have that we kind of feel a soul first, basically? Like, what is it like where spiritual activities are our basically gut reaction, our sensory relationship? Now, there is this statement that's very famous that talks about Shabbos having a neshama yisera, extra soul. Anyone heard that? Neshama yisera, extra soul. What does that mean? So I always thought it meant that it's, well, you got two souls now. You got special two souls. I don't know. What does it mean, two souls? You're more alive? I don't know what that means. So I actually found the source. In the source it says that what it means to have two souls, that someone could eat as much food as they want on Shabbos and not get sick. Eat as much food as you want on Shabbos and not get sick. I think what it's telling us is that, well, but wait, how is that soul? Soul's not eating food? Like, what's the connection? What's the connection between having an extra soul and being able to eat a lot of food? I think what it's telling is that Shabbos creates this overlap, this interface between a spiritual and a physical world. If you look at the laws about Shabbat, it talks about that Shabbos is time where you're supposed to have pleasure. You're supposed to make these magnificent meals. You're supposed to take a nap on Shabbos afternoon. There's physical pleasures are highlighted on Shabbos. And those things are mitzvahs. And there's a mitzvah to make to drink wine on Shabbos is a mitzvah. To have a lavish meal, you're supposed to make sure you have meat. Don't go vegetarian. I didn't want me to get in that discussion. I meant, don't say I'll just have like a piece of pita and just kind of get away with it. It's supposed to make a feast. Right? It's a time where our bodies are suddenly so super excited to do a mitzvah. It's this one time where we can get some sort of glimpse and insight what it means to love doing a mitzvah and feeling so natural. It's natural for us to say there's a 4-course meal. Every Friday night is a 4-course meal at my house. 4-course meal. Who doesn't sign up for that? Everyone signs up for that. And it's spiritual. This is what it's like. That's a kind of a window into what it's like where you have soul first. It's a time where doing a mitzvah seems very natural. It's not awkward. Not shaking the lulav. Lulav, yes, it's spiritual. Our body doesn't feel it. We don't know what it's like to be spiritual first. What does it feel like to have a mitzvah feel so natural until we get to Shabbos? Shabbos, you sit there. Oh, whoa, it's just everything looks so beautiful. Table's all set. We're told in the Talmud, make sure you have to have a white tablecloth. It has to be royal. You got to have everything. You have the fresh challah. You drink the wine. You have the community, you have people over, you talk, you sing, you don't have your cell phones around. It's just a transcendental experience. It's awesome, and your body is totally on board, and it's a way to experience what it's like, what's going to be like in the world to come, where spiritual activities feel very natural. Let's move on to the sun. I found multiple times where we have this connection between the sun and the afterworld. For example, we're told, this is from the Talmud and Sanhedrin, we're told that in Olam Haba, the light of the sun will be diminished. Why would the light of the sun be diminished? Because the light of the tzaddikim, the light of the righteous, will outshine the light of the sun. Therefore, comparatively, the light of the sun will be weaker. Not that it itself will be weaker, but comparatively, it won't be as bright. Additionally, we're told, as I told to Dan at the beginning here, Kol HaNeviim, all the prophets prophesied for the days of the Mashiach. But for Olam Haba, ayin lo ra'ata, an eye doesn't see it. Is there anything in this world that an eye cannot see?
Like, at that point in time, yeah, there was a lot in the world that the eye couldn't see because you didn't have medical technology. You couldn't see the inner workings of the body. You didn't know what happened in the brain.
Okay, so let's say right now.
And this is, like, I realize what I'm saying is not
You're
perfect.
overthinking it, Andrea.
I always do. But now there is, like, in this day and age, yeah. But, you know.
What
like,
is there that we can't see? It's a simple question.
We can't see the soul.
Feelings.
Most of the world.
No,
like I'm
we
sitting
can-
here right here, and I can't see outside. And
The sun. The sun's right there every day. And you go out and try to look at the sun. Try to look at the sun. You'll burn your eyes, exactly. The Almighty put the sun here, and it's there, and it's so part of our life. The sun stops shining for a second, we're all toast. Oh, actually the opposite. We're not toast. We're all frost. But the sun is such a crucial part of how we exist here. And it's ever present, and it's always there, and it's exactly 93 million miles, more precisely 92.6 million miles away. If it was a few hundred miles closer, further away, we'd have a very hard time having so much, habitable land. It's there, it's always there, yet we can't see it. And I can see it, and I cannot see it. The idea being that yes, the reward and the pleasure of the world to come, it's beyond our scope. We cannot imagine what it's like. We're told in the Mishnah that Dan once quoted to me, right? It's better to have 1 second of repentance and mitzvahs in this world than the whole world to come. And it's better to have 1 second of pleasure in the world to come than all this world. So, that's it's a Mishnah. This is a Mishnah. It says this 1 second of this world is better than the whole next world. The 1 second next world is better than the whole this world. That's what it says, and it seems to be an oxymoronic, exactly. And the answer is that this world, for what the purpose of this world is, of doing mitzvahs, once you're dead, once you're in next world, you don't have any other options. You can't add any more mitzvahs to it. Right? 1 second of opportunity equals the whole eternality of next world. You can never accomplish any more. But 1 second of next world, for what next world is all about, which is reward and punishment, pleasure, cannot be matched by all the pleasures in this world. So if you take all the pleasures of this world, all the steaks, all the Reuben sandwiches, everything, put it all together, it won't equal 1 second of pleasure in the world to come. It won't.
Even in South Dakota.
Even in South Dakota. Even if it was kosher.
Well, Reuben's got cheese on it.
So we've spent all this time talking about the superiority of soul and spiritual things over bodily things. Generally.
Superiority, we said this world is superior because here's where we do mitzvahs.
Right, yeah.
So this world is infinitesimally more superior to next world because now we have opportunity.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so why is the third one so bodily? The poop versus sex. Like, why are we going from these big soul and spiritual things to this third very
because maybe it could teach us something.
Yeah.
Maybe it's going to teach us something.
Another allegory.
If you guys remember,
Wait a minute, now that's a form of creation. That's why.
if
Well,
you guys,
like you've got, Shabbos is, commemorates creation. Sun, nothing grows. There's no life without the light and warmth of the sun. And so you can see it being sex because sex is this act of creation. Poop theoretically is creation, but not quite.
fertilizer.
I don't know.
Now, guys, I want to make a disclaimer. I believe that there's legitimacy to every word you said,
Okay.
and I believe that there's so much more out there than what we are covering today. Like we're giving, we gave 3 potential understandings as to why Shabbos is compared to the world to come. We have 2 for the sun. I believe there's more. We have the whole thing about Moses. I'm going to skip out. Remember, the face of Moses went to the face of the sun. Moses had to wear a mask. In Exodus it says, and Moses was the one who basically was able to live a spiritual world while being ensconced in a physical body. We have other sources that talk about how the soul kind of wants to leave every body, but somehow when Moses was about to die, we have this whole dialogue between his soul refusing to leave because Moses' soul was a more hospitable place, because Moses' body was, because he had perfected his body. We're leaving that on the side. Let's move on to the last thing, tashmish. And we said, if you read the notes ahead, huh? Nice. If you look at the Talmud and you analyze it, there's probably 150 arguments or back and forths on every page. There's so much debate and so much discussion. But almost never are we having debate as to the definition of a word. Why? Especially when the word itself is just tashmish nekavim. You could have just as easily said an extra word and taken out that extra 12 words of saying, which one is it? Is it this one? Is it that one? Well, it can't be that one because that makes you weak. It must be it's this one. Right? That whole thing must be it's part of the instruction. Must be that it's part of the instruction. Because otherwise it would have just very simply said tashmish nekavim, and then you won't have any doubt as to which tashmish we're talking about, and you would know they're talking about poop versus the sexual intercourse. So I wanted to say like this. Let's quote the Maimonides again. Maimonides points out, this is another quote from that same treatise on reward and punishment. He says, we live in a material world, and therefore are able to achieve only inferior and discontinuous delights. Remember, the words, the translation is not exact translation. But, boys, it doesn't continue. Spiritual delights are eternal. They last forever. They never break off. Between these two kinds of delights, there is no similarity of any sort. If you examine all the pleasures of this world, and pleasure is a very important element of this world because it's the reason why this world exists. Right? It's why humans exist. Everyone agrees that we're here to, physiologically, we're wired to seek pleasure. We're pleasure seekers at heart. If you examine all the pleasures that this world has to offer, they all share a commonality. What's the commonality that they share? That they have causation. If you have the ice cream, it feels good. There's a certain pleasure of consuming ice cream or chocolate bars or whatever. Right? Swimming in a swimming pool, right? There's a certain pleasure that you get. Now, if you have too much ice cream, you swim too much in the swimming pool, right? Then the pleasure wanes. There's a certain amount, you're kind of capped out. You have a limit. You could get a stomachache if you have too much food. Right? Physical pleasures kind of have these drawbacks. Many of them have a bad aftertaste. If you ate too much, you kind of you'd have a bad aftertaste. It can leave a bitter feeling behind. But all of them, all the physical pleasures, they share the fact that they have a cause. If you have when the cause is there, you feel good. When the ice cream's gone, you don't feel the pleasure anymore. It doesn't continue. You won't feel it tomorrow. You won't feel it the next. You certainly won't feel it a month later. In the world to come, we're told that these pleasures last forever. Souls don't have the same, clock that we have, and therefore they're able to last for. What does it mean for us? We can't even imagine that. It's once again back to the whole color thing. We're blind people. We don't understand what it means to live in a world where things aren't consumed and they disappear. Right? The eternity, that's beyond our but that's what the world to come is. Is there any pleasure in this world that can match that? Not in the quantity, right, in the degree of the pleasure, but in the nature and the kind and the style of the pleasure, where the pleasure kind of continues after the quote-unquote activity that brought about that pleasure.
Like having a child or something like that.
Well, we'll get to having a child in a second. So as Talmud says,
pleasure.
tashmish. Well,
Initially.
so it says tashmish. What does that mean? Is it talking about intercourse? Well, that makes you weak. It must be it's talking about going to the bathroom. What's it saying there? It's saying that objectively we could argue that the pleasure of intercourse supersedes that of going to the bathroom. I think it's a legitimate argument. But that's funny.
Maybe it's poop because you're at least guaranteed satisfaction.
Well, you're guaranteed the repeats. That's the other one, not so much.
It's universal. You will be satisfied by the end.
Yeah, it's good to laugh together, right?
It's the only thing left to do.
So the Talmud says to us, it cannot be that we're talking about intercourse because it makes you weak afterwards. What's it telling us? We're talking about the measure of pleasure. Remember, 1 second of the world to come supersedes all the pleasure of this world's combined. Of this world combined. What it's telling us is we're not talking about the measure of pleasure, we're talking about the kind of pleasure. And the kind of pleasure in this world, almost all of them share this thing where it makes you weak. Or at least, minimally, it when the cause is there, then the effect is there. When the cause is gone, the effect is gone. There's but one tiny pleasure that we can highlight, where you kind of feel better afterwards, or the good feeling kind of feels through. Like if someone really needs to go to the bathroom, like afterwards, like to have this relief, and you kind of go, wow, you feel good for even though the cause of the pleasure is no longer there. And that's a kind of just some sort of 1/1,000,000th, or kind of an insight, a measure, a tiny similarity that we can find in this world between that kind of in some way, shape, or form mirrors the kind of experience we could have in next world. When I first examined this piece of Talmud, I was like imagining someone like was Shabbos, or someone sitting in the sun and going to the bathroom. Like that's the ultimate, you kind of have all three together. But what it really what it really is telling us is that there's this idea. We don't know much about it. We know we don't know much about it. We know that we can't really examine it. It's like looking at the sun. But there's some sort of insights that we could gain, and if we spend the time and we learn enough, we could gain a certain understanding into a little bit of the components of this idea. You asked about having kids. I want to argue that certain pleasures are not a measure of the world to come, but they're actually experiences of the world to come. The idea of the pleasure of having a child is a spiritual pleasure. It's not a physical pleasure that shares common aspects of a spiritual pleasure. It's a spiritual pleasure itself.
Sure, it is. When they move out, it's very physical.
Yeah, very physical, yeah.
It's very spiritual too.
We have a big group. All the kids are coming in here to do something at 11:30. So
At 11:30 exactly?
Yeah, probably.
Okay, so
Let's go to another room. Or if you want to continue in the
yeah, we could go to the sanctuary.
11:29.
11:29, yeah. We could go to the sanctuary. I have some more to say. And I also have a beautiful idea that I read from this past week's parsha. I want to share with you guys as well. You guys want to move there? Is that fine?
Yeah.
Sure.
So, what I wanted to say was that I think having kids, but kind of like rearing children and seeing them flourish, that I think wouldn't really fit into the category. Yeah, someone said, "Hey, what about studying Torah?" And studying Torah, as we'll see, Maimonides writes. Now, Maimonides, in a different place, in the book of mitzvahs, he calls a certain method of studying Torah the greatest pleasure ever. And he uses the same verbiage as he uses for when he talks about the world to come. What he's telling you is that there is ways to experience this in this world. But then you're experiencing the real thing. This particular piece of Talmud is talking about a measure of the world to come. It's something which is physical. Going to the bathroom is a physical thing, right? Shabbos, we do a lot of physical things. It's a mitzvah that has physical components to it. And the pleasure of Shabbos could be you're eating chicken, or you're eating soup, or you're eating meat, or you're just taking a nap. Those pleasures have a certain spiritual flavor to it, or a certain component that it shares with the world to come. And I remember I once was reading. Gosh, I can't remember what it was. It was at least like 10 years ago. I read in some book. Some guy was saying, I don't remember what he was saying exactly. I wish I could remember. I was trying to remember this, racking my brain yesterday, trying to remember this. But he had brought some conclusive proof from some text that having children or watching your children grow is not a physical pleasure. It's a spiritual pleasure alone. I wish I could remember.
Not everybody can have children, and not everybody chooses to get married.
That's true. But it's a certain pleasure that parents know that to watch your kids succeed is a fantastic pleasure.
That way, but
that's right.
Not everybody has
of course.
that ability.
Of course. Yeah.
But you're right. There's nothing physically pleasurable about raising a child. Because they're
No, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm saying if
before she goes to bed, she comes and hugs you. I mean,
yeah, but that's a
it's
spiritual. But having a hug is, I'm saying, from your kid is, it's not physically gratifying. It's emotionally maybe.
And then
It's kind of like somehow.
You ruined my life. You don't understand.
So like I said, this Rambam in Maimonides, we talked about the mitzvah of loving God, and he says, I like this other one. Could you hear me from there? Okay, so loving God. So he talks about how do you love God. Now remember, we have 4 chapters of Maimonides on theology, and he himself writes that that theology is not something we're very good at as Jews. Defining God, and we don't spend a lot. The Christians talk a lot about that. Not the Jew. We don't have so much. It's God is the reason for it all, but to understand God is beyond our control. That's what, we're not even allowed to say the 4-letter name of God. And I'll say it because we're talking about God Himself. God Himself is something beyond our capacity. How are we supposed to love God? How do you go about loving God? What do you do?
Follow the Torah rules.
Okay, that's an easy answer, but what does that mean?
He do what He says.
How do you have an emotional relationship with an idea that you can't even fully understand? That's a problem.
Yes,
it is. So Maimonides lays out a 4-point or 4-part process, and he says you have to think, you have to delve until you into one of 3 topics, either Torah or mitzvahs or creation, science, what we would call, right? Which is either the kind of the intelligence of God, like the Torah, the instructions of God, or the handiwork of God. So think about it, but think about it deeply, delve in it, like invest into it, invest time and energy and thought until you have an insight, until you get it, until something clicks. And then you have what he calls the greatest level of pleasure possible. That's what he says. You have in this insight, and that's love of God. Like love of God. Love of God is a deep, deep, deep appreciation of God's infinite wisdom. How do you do that? Right. You have to really invest. You have to think about something. You have to v'yizbonin. The word yizbonin means to delve into a very deep level. Delve is not deep enough. Even deeper. Think about what's the right word? Introspect, not really introspect. To delve, but to delve in a profound way until you have some sort of insight. Something clicks. You spend 6 months trying to figure out what this means. Right? You were bothered by this particular piece of Talmud, or by this particular mitzvah, or by this particular double helix, and you spent tons of time in your lab, and suddenly you get it, and you're like, whoa, this is so much more complex than we think. God is so much more, whoa, you kind of basically have appreciation of God's greatness, and that's an incredible pleasure of discovery. That's what it means to love God. And that's demanded of every one of us. To love God, it's part of the Shema. You have to love God. Because God demands of us. He says, listen, to understand God Himself, it's really beyond our control. But God kind of created these avenues, multiple avenues. You have the Torah, you have science, you have the mitzvahs. These are what God tells us to do, or God shows us God's handiwork, and it's a way for us to appreciate Him. And that appreciation of God, we talk about enjoying the radiance of God. Remember we said, the Olam Haba, the world to come, there's no eating, there's no drinking, there's no anointing, there's no washing. It just tzaddikim, righteous people sitting, and they're experiencing the pleasure of God. What does that mean? What does it mean experience? It's a certain realization of the magnitude of the incredibleness of God. Well, and that's a tremendous pleasure, and it could be experienced in this world, and it was experienced by the people that got it. If you invest 12 years into trying to find some sort of problem in biology, and you just invest, and then you get it, a pleasure unmatched by any other pleasure in this world. Why? Because that's the pleasure of experiencing God. And
I thought that there was a very vague around heaven. Well, it's going to be a new topic: heaven, between heaven and hell. That in Judaism, it's a very vague concept, heaven or the afterlife or whatever.
yeah, I'm saying we don't know a lot about it, and I'm saying one of the questions we asked at the beginning, I just remember we didn't answer, is that all these things are not. It doesn't say anywhere in the Torah, in the Bible, about the world to come. It doesn't say anywhere in the Bible, in the Torah about Mashiach, but that's already brought down in the Bible itself. Like we talk about those things, and I think it's important. It's important for us to ask the question: well, if it's so fundamental, why is it not discussed? So yes, is it fundamental? Maybe it's not so fundamental. Remember, Maimonides brings this laws of the Mashiach all the way at the end. Maybe it's not so important. Or one of the reasons presented was that the Torah doesn't make any predictions that are unverifiable. I could tell you, if you don't believe in JC, you're gonna face eternal damnation. When you die, you'll be raked over the coals again and again for eternity. Right? That's something that we can't. It's unprovable, and it's unfalsifiable. So no one will ever know if it's. So it's basically a way I can intimidate you, because I could freak you out. Hey, I have nothing to lose, right? The Torah doesn't do that. None of the predictions in the Torah are unverifiable. None of them are about things that exist in some other world other than the world that we're in today and that we're obligated to keep the Torah in. The Torah makes predictions. It makes tons of predictions. All of them are here and now. Well, not necessarily now, but here on this world with our current repertoire of perception points. Torah says, you go back to Israel because that happened on planet Earth, and we went back to Israel. And now we can see that came true. If the Torah told us everything that happened after you die, or all those things are it's a very weak tactic that, or it could be a weak tactic. Yes, it might be true, but still, we don't want to engage with that because those are things that are unverifiable. Unverifiable and unfalsifiable, you can make it false. You can't disprove it because no one has ever come back from the dead and tell us what actually happens. Well, you have those near-death experiences, but no one has come with great detail. Near death, no one has had like death experiences, right? So that's why we don't. Yeah, it's not so important for us. It's important a little bit. That's what we're told about it, but it's not so important for us. In respect to or in comparison to other important things, but also it's not predicted in the Torah. It's not foretold in the Torah because it's not what we do. We don't just go around and make these bold, audacious predictions that'll freak people out and kind of compel them, kind of twist their arm to observe the Torah, or else you're gonna get burned over raked over the hot coals. Because that's not the way the Torah goes. The Torah makes predictions. All those things are logical and are planet Earth and are verifiable and falsifiable. But this pleasure of the world to come that can be experienced is real. And you talk to people that are that invest their lives in ideas, in science, and they will tell you that there's no experience like the ones that they've had when they've finally had their breakthrough, their discovery, after years and years of investing. But where was that pleasure from? It's a pleasure of discovery. It's a pleasure that envelops the person when they have an insight into God. Yes, is there insight? Is that all that there is with all the cosmos and the trillions and sextillions of stars and everything like that, and the trillions and trillions of atoms within us and cells? Of course, it's vastly more complex than anything we can wrap our heads around. Someone mentioned the brain recently. Someone quoted you about the brain. Yeah, the brain is something that we haven't even scratched the surface of understanding how it works. The complexity and all the neurons and all the interactions, it's just wow, But our little insight, when we have this idea, this perception, this understanding of God, tremendous pleasure unmatched by any of the pleasures. With Torah, I know that there are people that will swear by this. You see people that, my Rebbe in Israel, my teacher in Israel, So he gives the biggest Torah discourse in the world right now, and probably in the last 2,000 years. He has every day 7,000 students for an hour long discourse. 700 students. Sorry, 700 students.
It's like Radio City Music.
Now, what they're doing is they're studying Talmud on the deepest level possible, like for a minimum of 12 hours a day. Like, these are incredible scholars that are dedicating their lives to it. And if you guys walked into one of these rooms, you've never seen anything like it in your life. You see, it's basically think of 3,000 or maybe 5,000 square feet, just massive room, and benches that seat 10 people. 5 groups of 2. Each one has a stender. Stender is basically like a lectern. Think like a lectern, but like just like that. That's very small, and just like 3 feet between you and the next one, and they're just screaming on top of the lungs. If you walk in there, you're like, this. What is going on here? It's just the highest level of debate that exists, and it goes on for hours. 4 hours in the morning, 4 hours in the afternoon, and then 2 hours at night.
They scream at the same time?
At each other, because they're arguing, they're debating, and they spend
So in pairs, right?
Yeah, in pairs, and they discuss a Talmud. They're learning a particular piece of Talmud. They do about 10 pages. The average is about 8 pages every 5 months, basically. So they're very slowly, very intensely, and you see people they're talking to each other on top of their lungs, and they're arguing, they're debating, and they're doing it for hours, and they come back, and it's Sunday, and they know that often Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday half a day, and you're like, well, these people are really investing their lives. Very intelligent people, and the rest of their lives studying this ancient text.
So what happens if they agree in some passage?
Yeah, maybe they agree. Maybe they
move on. Right?
They move on.
Yeah.
So you spent.
Oh, I spent years and years and years in yeshiva.
Over in that particular.
With one of them, yeah, that one's the biggest one, and it's remarkable. You see some people there that have dedicated their lives to Torah study, and they're the happiest people you ever met. They don't have tons.
Work.
No.
Yeah.
So maybe they do work or whatever, or their wife works, but they don't live lives of luxury, and they don't have cars. They take buses, and they live a very frugal life, but they have this pleasure that we can't even dream about. Like, it's just so beyond, and they're so much happier than we ever are. They are.
In this country, aren't a lot of them on welfare?
Maybe. I'm saying a lot of people. I'm saying
I'm paying for them.
Do they have similar institutions in America too, like in
Huh?
New York?
They have some. There's in the tri-state area. There's some of it. Yeah, and it's growing. But my point is that you begrudge them because you're paying for them. Is that it?
Well, no, I begrudge their wives. Poor wives are doing all the work, and they're sitting around praying. Yes,
No, they're not praying. Not praying.
Well, praying, studying.
Deriving pleasure. That's what you want to say.
Yeah, deriving pleasure.
Highest level of pleasure.
It's the highest level of pleasure. Otherwise, but the point is that the people won't do it with such gusto, with such dedication, unless it's really that fantastic, and it is. The happiest people that I've met are the people that are just engaged in Torah study. Yes, is it for everyone? Probably not. Is it viable, sustainable economic model for the entire nation? No, and it never was. Maimonides says that it's not all about that. He was very much anti the whole idea of having someone pay for you to study. He writes that. He says that he goes on these diatribes. So very rarely does Maimonides, the rational Maimonides, ever get taken away, basically. But in several places, place number one is in his laws of Torah study. Place number 2 is in his commentary in the Mishnah in chapters of the Fathers, where it says, "Don't make the Torah a crown to get honor from, or a axe or a pick or a hoe to dig with." And he diatribe. He basically riles against these people or against the idea that someone says someone else should pay for my scholarship. in the other place, but then he says that those people that do dedicate their lives to Torah study, to spirituality, they're the heart of the nation. And they're someone that you should support. So yes, he kind of basically takes a kind of more even-handed approach by saying, yes, these are the people that are holding up the spiritual fort of the Jewish people. They're maintaining our ties with our tradition, and they're the scholars, and they're the light of the nation. But he says, don't abuse it, obviously.
So the debate
like
in
the
Israel
monks.
now, when Israel was founded, it was about 300 or 400 people. Who
Yeah,
was
so
and
yeah,
now
so
it's 10-15% of the population.
I don't know about that, but yes, in Israel, this is a much bigger
I read about
political
it.
issue
I read about it.
because Ben Gurion made this agreement.
Exception.
This exception for yeshiva students. There were 400 or 500 yeshiva students in all of Israel, and it was everyone was sure it would be dead. It would die. It's been the death of Torah has been greatly exaggerated. Many times, and so they made this deal as part of the law where they're exempt from the army and whatever. And today there's tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands of people, and that's changing. But either way, this pleasure is as Maimonides writes, and it's experienced by people even today, is something which is unmatched by anything. And last quote that I'll pull from the Maimonides, that treatise on reward and punishment. But if you want to read the thing in its entirety, it's a fantastic read. It's fairly long, but it's I have a copy of it in English. If anyone wants, just email me ywolbe@torchweb.org or go to my website at rabwolbe.com and send me a message. So it's a fantastic read. But he writes, the last thing that we'll quote from it: men who choose to purify themselves will reach this spiritual height. If you remember, he said earlier, yes, it's like color for a blind person. It's beyond their capacity. You only get it after great searching. There's a lot of work that you have to do to actually achieve this. But once you do that, you'll reach the spiritual height. They will neither experience bodily pleasure nor will they want them. There comes a point in time where if someone is so has progressed so much in their spiritual pleasure life that the physical pleasure doesn't appeal to them at all, doesn't excite them at all. They will resemble a powerful teen. He would hardly want to go back to playing ball with children as he did before he became teen. Can you imagine a teen saying, "Oh, you know what I want to do? I want to play Game Boy. That's exciting." Once you kind of graduate to a high level play, it doesn't excite you anymore. It doesn't. He would hardly want to go back to playing ball. Right, such games attracted him when he was a child, and he was unable to understand the real difference between playing ball and having royalty. Like children, we now praise and glorify the delights of the body. That excites us, and we don't understand the delights of the soul. But if we do have this heightened experience, it's something that will change our lives probably, and we'll always want to be able to recapture that. And everything else will kind of lose their allure a little bit.
That's like the born agains are having all of a sudden a vocation, like you suddenly a revelation and all this thing.
In Judaism, we don't believe in having having just random revelations. It doesn't happen to anyone. If someone wakes up, we talked about prophecy a little bit last time we were here. Someone wakes up and decides, "Oh, I'm a prophet. God spoke to me." Unless they're at that level, you have to earn it, and corresponding to the amount of effort invested in something, that's how much you're able to pull out of it. So we don't believe in just someone having prophecy overnight, or that doesn't happen. There's no such thing as a spiritual lottery. It's just whatever you work, whatever you invest, that's what you'll have. There's no shortcuts. Well, there might be some shortcuts, actually. There might be some shortcuts.
But usually those people, there's some provocation.
I don't hear the shortcuts. Yeah, I know. Let's do it. We'll put it in the winter schedule. Spiritual shortcuts.
There's usually a provocation that triggers this revelation or something. It's not just out of the blue. All of a sudden they woke up and said, "Oh yeah."
Well, yes.
Something bad that happened.
Something
in their life
external.
or something.
They might have external, like
Right.
yes. I was hit by a bus, and thank God I survived. Something like that, right?
Yeah.
That's not an internal experience.
No, I got you.
Of course not. And that's that. I know we went off topic.
Yes.
But I think that the number one goal of the class was to kind of basically have like an example of what it's like to try to investigate and dissect the Talmud. It says something that on the surface, if you read it, you would say, this is baloney. This doesn't make any sense. So, there's so many problems, but when you investigate and you delve deeper, you see a lot of insights. Basically, a lot of life lessons. Like, if we take what we learned today, and we could take each particular slice of wisdom that we tried to learn, and it could be its own topic. There's so much just pushed in, but it's just concealed with this mask. And if you learn and you kind of live with an idea, you could kind of slowly peel away and kind of gain the insight of the lesson, and it can teach you a lot about life and try to maximize the pleasure. Yes.
There's a verse in either Psalms or Proverbs, I think, and I'm about to misquote it, but says that it's to the honor of God to conceal a thing and the glory of kings to seek it out.
Something like that.
That's about
Made
it.
sense.
But that's really what it is. Like we started talking at the beginning of class about, how the Talmud intentionally makes things a little bit confusing, and about how we can,
a little bit, a lot of it confusing.
A lot. And it makes me, I remember my first year of law school, your first year of law school is intentionally hard. And my contracts professor on the very first day said,
trying to weed out.
Well, he basically said, let me just tell you right now, you're here to learn contracts in spite of me. And he was one of those teachers that made it intentionally difficult. And, something that could have been very clear and simple, chose to teach it in a way that was very confusing. And it's exactly what the Talmud is doing. And I think it ties into that verse, is that, it's the honor of God to conceal it. But if you take the time and effort to seek it out, then that's your glory. It's the glory of a king to try to figure that mystery out. And it all goes together for me. I think this doesn't even make sense now that it's coming out of my mouth.
No, it sounds like yes.
But that's kind of the gist of it, is, you can go ahead and dig into this literature, and it's not going to make sense, and there are going to be a lot of mysteries and things to fight about, but it's the process of doing that gives you that moment of insight that creates that love of God that Maimonides was talking about.
It also goes back to what you said weeks ago, which is you only appreciate something if you work for it. A la the gumball machine doesn't work. If it's just popped out in little nuggets.
I like the way, and I call back to previous classes.
But isn't there a common idea, like between the Sabbath and the first thing you said, but that you need somebody else? I mean, to experience the Sabbath, you can try to do it yourself, but the joy of sharing it and appreciating the soup or the cholent or whatever that's to come, to do it alone isn't enough.
Yeah, so
to do it with other people.
yeah, so there's always the element of community.
Of study, learning Talmud.
Yes.
I mean, it's one thing if I took a page up there's a book in front of me, the Talmud. If I tried to read it, I might gain something. But if I talk to you or talk to you or whoever, I'm doing it together. Experience the Sabbath with somebody else. Experience a book. I think that's where the
I actually had when I was in a yeshiva in Israel, so it was a kind of a different. It was structured as it kind of had all levels. It had like more advanced students, and it had newcomers who knew nothing. So one day I was tasked with learning or talking to a guy who just walked in. And, a lot of Jews in America, well, they had some sort of background. They went to day school, to Sunday school, to Solomon Schechter, something, And this guy walked in and he didn't know anything. He didn't know a single Hebrew letter. Nothing. He didn't know anything. Nothing. And he was a very intelligent guy, and we kind of hit it off really well. And the first day I said, okay, fine, you don't know how to read Hebrew. Let's get the flashcards. And this is a very, very, very intelligent young man. And he was there with flashcards with me. So I was saying, this is an Aleph, this is the sound of H, this is a Gimel, whatever. That's what I did with him, whatever. And he picked everything up like this.
But was it the fact that he knew he was a Jew and that was it? Or
yeah,
he didn't even know he was a Jew?
Yeah, he knew he was Jewish, didn't mean anything to him.
Anything?
Somehow he had some sort of desire to come to Israel. He came to Israel, he ended up in the yeshiva, and he's like, I'm doing it. So he started learning more and more and more, and then it was the Passover time, so I was going back to visit my family, in the East Coast. So I said to him, there's another guy who was a little more advanced who had just finished an entire tract of the Talmud. I said, why don't you guys learn together? Finish this tract of the Talmud over the break while I'm in New York. So they said, okay, fine. I'm like, okay, I just did that, whatever. I went to New York. I forgot all about it. I come back. I'm like, oh, how you doing? He's like, oh, by the way, we're almost finished. We have 6 pages to go. These guys actually took my idea seriously and actually sat down and they were learning like 5 hours a day together. And over the whole break, when no one else was in yeshiva, it was Passover time, everyone was off, and they were pounding away. They finished the whole thing. They did it. And now I just got a call from him actually on the phone. My brother called me. My brother is in yeshiva still, the older brother. And he tells me, do you know this guy named Chaim Gamliel, which is his Hebrew name? He's like, he's sitting next to me in the mirror. He's like sitting next to me in like the yeshiva, like this advanced yeshiva. And like just, basically, not quite overnight, but over a couple of years, he became from someone who knows nothing to someone who's learning in the most advanced yeshiva in the world on the most advanced track, and he just became like literally from rags to riches. Overnight, but over a couple of years. And that's remarkable. Yes, but most people that don't have a strong background, it's much, much harder to them to have this kind of level of connection with Torah. Of course. But we value Torah study and mitzvah connection, any little bit, whatever level, whatever degree, whatever someone's holding, irrespective of their denomination, which is a bunch of nonsense. We don't believe. There's no politics in family. I don't believe in denominations. Affiliation, all that's nonsense. We're Jews, we're family. We have a tremendous tradition, and whatever someone does is incredibly valuable and incredibly meaningful, and something that they should cherish, and something that I admire. Will everyone reach the level of advanced Talmud? Probably not. Does that mean we should just fold our cards and just go home? Also not. Anyhow, that's that. Thank you all for letting me go over time.
By the way, just to let you know, we are having class next week, even though there's no religious school, which means we won't have to be shuffled around.
Fantastic.
It's,
what's the topic?
God and man, the delicate balancing act of faith and personal responsibility.
Ooh, nice. Got to prepare the class.
Esoterics.
You came.
That was my suggestion.
Parents are observant.
But then we're going to go back to history because we couldn't finish up.
Standard Jews.
And New York.
Yeah. I thought it was Israeli.
So then there will be no class the Sunday after Thanksgiving. Right. Then we'll do 2 more histories, try to hopefully wrap it up. And then the Sunday before Christmas Day, we will have a class, why Jews do not believe in Jesus.
Nice.
Yeah, but we have the Messianic
Seasonal.
Jews who do believe in Jesus.
So we'll have a seasonal topic.
The gala.
And the gala. Gala's Wednesday night. So if anyone doesn't have a seat, speak to Dan. Dan's arranging a third table. Is that right?
When you just to look you off, I'll see you in the room.
You don't mind it, I'm so
Oh, I